All right, thank you so much, guys. Good morning to everyone, especially to our board members and those who are joining us either near or far. We are grateful and so honored that you have selected this opportunity to give to us to reserve for these 2 hours or so as we get ready to move into this amazing year, 2025. Challenging year so far in our nation, but a year definitely that we want to make sure that we honor those who we are called to serve, the areas we're called to serve, the people we are called to serve, and to be culturally sensitive to their needs and to respect all individuals that are made under God's amazing image. I want to call this meeting to order at 10:07, February the 12th, 2025. As Yas said, I believe we have met quorum, so we are ready to begin our meeting. We're going to ask that all board members, if you wouldn't mind, placing your cameras visible so that we can make sure that we see, so we can honor the quorum that we have together. That'd be terrific. All those that are not speaking, if you wouldn't mind just muting your cameras, excuse me, muting your computers, that'd be terrific as well, just so that we don't have any background interference and we can get through our meeting in decent and order and time. We're going to ask if we would do our welcomes and our introductions. We'll do our welcome and our introduction of all of our board members. I'll begin and then I'll just popcorn it over to the next individual, and we'll do that so that we can make sure that we meet and hit every board member that is on this amazing call. All right. My name is DJ Kreiner. I'm from St. Rest Baptist Church, and I was appointed by Mr. Banta. I will pass it over to Miss Angela.
Good morning. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Angela Sierra. I am an attorney with the California Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Enforcement Section, and I am the Attorney General Rob Banta's designee on the board, and I also serve as a co-chair of the board this year. So thank you all for being here. Let's see, I will turn it over to LaWanda Hawkins.
LaWanda, do we have audio for you, Sister Co-Chair?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. My name is LaWanda Hawkins. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today as we continue the critical work of addressing racial and identity profiling in our communities. I was appointed by former Governor Jerry Brown, and I'm located in Los Angeles. And I will turn it over, I don't have my glasses, to Andrea.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrea Guerrero from Alliance San Diego. I'm an appointee of past Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins, also the co-chair of the board. And I am having trouble with my screen, so I'm not quite sure who the other board members are on the call. If somebody could pass for me. DJ Kreiner, would you mind?
Sure. Justin, are you on? Okay. Bill? Brother? Nice home too, bro.
Hey, what's going on, all? Bill Armelin. I'm a professor at San Jose State University in sociology. I've been on the board for several years now. And my apologies, man, Teams makes me sign on 7 times before it works. So
yeah, man, same here.
My apologies for being a couple minutes late. The thing just wouldn't let me on. But anyhow, glad to be here. Good to see everybody.
And Bill, you could popcorn it to the next if you want to, man, in between bites. Whatever you're eating, man, pass it down to Fresno because I haven't ate it all this morning.
I think the next speaker would be Cha.
Good morning, everyone. Cha Vang, she, her, with Deputy Director with AAPI Specific Empowerment Education Fund. I was appointed by former Attorney General Baceres.
Have we successfully introduced all of our board?
I think so. That's here right now.
Are there any board members that have not been able to introduce themselves? We want to give you the pleasure and the honor of introducing yourselves, and we also want to put it on record. If not, we thank you for all board members that have logged on today. We are grateful. We'll try to do our best to make sure that we walk through our agenda decently in order to make sure we honor your time and your commitment, but also the times that you're spending away from either your families or from your organization or businesses. We appreciate you. If we can, let's bring up our September 5th, 2024 minutes from our previous meeting. I'm pretty sure all of us have had the opportunity to review them. If not, we'll give you about a minute and a half or so just to do your final reviews of them before we take a motion to adopt the minutes and permanent records. If there are any necessary corrections that we need to make, please, we will ask if we could do so now. If not, I will entertain a motion to adopt the September 5th, 2024 minutes as read and accept them and place them in permanent records. Do I have a motion on the floor?
I second it.
Lauren, can you make the motion for me? If you would choose to, we need a motion before a second.
Okay, yes, Board Member Lawanda would like to motion that this be put on the floor. That
Thank you
we
so much. Thank you, Sister Co-Chair. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Bill. It has been moved and properly second. All in favor, please signify with aye.
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 Opposed is nay. I do see Ms. Angela's hand is raised. Sister Gaz, do we need to take an individual? Do we need to poll into one individually, or are we satisfied?
Sure, we can take a roll call vote. I can facilitate that right
Roll
now.
call? Okay, no problem. We will now do a roll call vote for each board member on their motion.
Sure. So Board Member Armling,
Aye.
Board Member Kreiner,
Yes.
Board Member Guerrero,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Board Member Hawkins,
Aye.
Board Member Sierra,
Aye.
Board Member Smith,
Yes.
thank you, and Board Member Vang.
Yes.
Excellent. So the vote passes unanimously and the minutes have been approved.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yaz. Thank you, board members. Next on the agenda, we will move to updates by the Department of Justice. I will now pass it over to Ms. Yaz or to whoever's going to lead that. Rebecca, are you leading this one?
I am. Thank you.
All right, we'll pass it over to America's Next Top Model, Ms. Rebecca.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rebecca Fretz. I'm a Deputy Attorney General with the Civil Rights Enforcement Section in Los Angeles. There are just a couple of items that we wanted to cover today to help prompt the discussion by the subcommittee about the upcoming 2026 RIPA report, particularly the complaint and accountability sections. First, we just wanted to review the recommendations from the draft complaints accountability sections of last year's report that were tabled during the last full RIPA board meeting. In the event that the subcommittee can reconsider those items today, if you want to bring them back up for another vote by the full board. And then we are going to provide some recommendations for topics that can be included in the complaints and accountability sections of the upcoming 2026 RIPA report, and which the subcommittee can discuss further today. So first, I'm just going to briefly go over the recommendations from last year that were tabled during the last full board meeting. I believe we're going to screen share those with you so you can follow along. Thank you. Okay, so there were 5 tabled recommendations during the last full board meeting for the civilian complaints and accountability section. The civilian complaints, there was 3 tabled recommendations that were youth policy related recommendations. First, there was a recommendation that posts modify the complaint form used to file complaints under SB 2 to allow the complainant to indicate whether the allegation arises from an incident involving a person 17 and younger or between the ages of 18 and 24. And then the next 2 tabled recommendations were about amending both Penal Code Section 13510.8 and Regulation 1205 to require consideration of the complainant's age in determining if a peace officer's conduct rises to the level of serious misconduct that warrants decertification. And then there were 2 tabled recommendations for the accountability section. The board, the recommendation was that the board recommends that the legislature consult with posts, law enforcement agencies, experts, researchers, and community groups about harmful conduct by officers that may not fit within the 9 categories of serious misconduct that serve as the basis for posts to suspend or revoke certification, but still incompatible with the duties of a peace officer. The board further recommended that the legislature make findings and amend Penal Code Section 13510.8 to add any additional categories of serious misconduct that are harmful to the public and incompatible with the peace officer's duties. And the second tabled recommendation was that the board recommends that the legislature amend Penal Code Section 13510.8, subdivision D, to expand the authority of the post executive director to continue an immediate temporary suspension of an officer where the circumstances indicate that the officer continues to pose a danger to the public, even if one of the statutory grounds for imposing the immediate temporary suspension has been resolved. So we're bringing up these tabled recommendations today because there's some points of procedure that we just want to inform the subcommittee about. If you want to reconsider any of these tabled recommendations and bring them back up for another vote before the full board, then a board member must make a motion to reconsider these tabled recommendations, any of these tabled recommendations at the next full board RIPA board meeting. If no one moves to reconsider any of these tabled recommendations for another vote during the next full board meeting, those recommendations will be considered dead. Just as a reminder, the accountability recommendations were related to SB2. They were tabled because the board felt that there was not sufficient SB2 data related to police decertification at this point to make these recommendations. That was a little premature to do so, and we will not have any additional data to report before the next full board meeting. So those are the tabled recommendations that you all can discuss today during the subcommittee meeting and decide if you want to bring any of these up for another vote at the next full board meeting. Next, I just want to move on to, yes, Angela, did you raise your hand?
I did, but you can finish, and I have a question about these recommendations about a logistical question, but I thought you were done, but go ahead and finish. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, it's fine. If you want to ask a question about this section before we move on to other recommendations.
Okay, great. A quick question is, if our committee doesn't vote to re-up these at the next board meeting, wouldn't we still be able to do further work on these topics? For example, the first set about, the first set of recommendations that, to the extent that the full board may have thought we need some additional data or some additional subject matter experts on this, we could still do that even if we don't raise these for a vote at the next meeting, correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct. Other members, Yasi or Alex, please correct me on those points of order if that's not correct, but I believe they can still be discussed and brought, but they'd have to be brought back through the whole process. I believe the recommendation process and, voted on again. But if any other DOJ team members have different thoughts on that, please feel free to weigh in. Yasi?
That's correct. That is correct. So the board is able to continue exploring these topics as well and doesn't necessarily need to make recommendations on it. But if the board continues to explore and decides that they do want to make recommendations, it would go through the usual recommendation process.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions about any of these tabled recommendations for the procedure? Okay. If not, I'm going to move on to just some proposed recommendations of topic areas that can be covered in the accountability and complaint sections of the upcoming 2026 RIPA report. First, for the complaint section, one topic the subcommittee could discuss today to include is looking into law enforcement agencies' investigation process for receiving complaints and looking into what would make a good, robust complaint process. The report could assess to what degree a thorough and robust investigation is both cost and resource effective. There are currently no best practices available for law enforcement complaint processes, so this would probably require the involvement of experts to help develop recommendations regarding how to improve the complaint process. Another topic area could be tracking the effect of deterrent language in law enforcement complaint forms, and looking at how adding or removing deterrent language has impacted the number of complaints that are submitted to law enforcement agencies. I believe this topic was raised at one of the previous subcommittee meetings. And another topic could be looking at regional differences in the number of complaints submitted related to RIPA-related complaints. For example, looking at the difference between law enforcement agencies, the number of complaints received in Southern California versus Northern California. As far as the accountability section, last year's accountability section covered the SB2 process, decertification process. It gave an overview of that process, and then provided some of the data that has been submitted to POST about that POST has on their public website related to decertifications of peace officers related to serious misconduct. Some of the data included in the last year's report included the number of complaints that involve serious misconduct allegations, the most common grounds for certification actions initiated by POST, the top 10 law enforcement agencies with officers who were subject to SB2 certification actions, and the number of temporary suspensions. So a topic for the subcommittee to consider today is what areas you want the accountability section to cover, if you want to continue to dig deeper into SB2, or if you want to cover some other topic area, if you want to at least include some updated SB2 certification action data in this report as well. That is an area that could be discussed today. And then finally, one other topic to consider today is a theme for the RIPA report for the complaints and accountability sections. This is probably also a topic for the full board for the whole report, but you could also discuss if you want any themes for the accountability and complaint section, and what theme you'd like to have for these sections, if you'd like a theme at all. So that is just a brief update from us with some recommendations to help prompt the discussions today. And I will happy to answer any questions and also turn it back over to Member Kreiner to facilitate that discussion.
Would you like to move into those efforts now? Mr. Rebecca, have you concluded your report?
Yes, I'm finished. Apologies.
All right, wonderful. So Rebecca, we thank you so much. Like, we honor you for your time, the commitment that you've given, but also such a thorough and amazing report that you have given. We honor you. We thank you for that. And next on the agenda is our board discussion. So based on the updates that have been given by DOJ, we want to have a little discussion. We have reserved about an hour span time to kind of give that discussion so that our DOJ team can take notes on that, answer questions based on the report that was just given, this thorough report. So I will now open it up to our board, and I'll just facilitate and moderate our discussional period to make sure that we don't stay in one place too long, but we give every board member the opportunity to have words. So we'll start off with our board member Amelie.
Thanks. So as far as I understand it, does it make sense that we should just kind of line these up, knock them down? So like the first one would be the old recommendations. What do we want to keep? What do we not want to pursue? Whatever. The next one would be all of the new potential issue areas that she just mentioned. And then third would be whether or not we need a theme, which I would argue we're a little early to be talking about a theme. We have no idea what we're doing yet. So I don't know how we come up with a theme today. So maybe we don't even need to do number 3, but it sounds like we should start with the other 2, like with the old ones and then the new ones.
I agree.
Thank you,
Can we put them up so we can look at them? So we can go line by line? Is there any way they can put them up?
Yeah, if we can
pull
put
those
those
up
back
for you.
up, we can just line them up, knock them down, just take them each in turn.
Are you able to see the screen?
So I'll just get us started. I'm also talking fast, y'all, because I'm also, unfortunately, I have a hard out at 11:15, so I'm trying to make my contributions as best I can. My apologies. I have to go teach class. But from what I remember, law enforcement had a near temper tantrum, like aneurysm over number one. So I think if we're gonna consider to push for number one, we need to really have a strong argument as to why. Number two for me, I would like to keep, and I would like to reintroduce. It's odd to me that number two is in any way controversial. It seems to me that whether a peace officer is dealing with a child or dealing with a grown adult, should be considered in their treatment, in how the complaint is considered, in the same way that we would consider that in really any of these kinds of situations. And for number three, I don't have strong feelings. So again, for me, if I recall, number one, we would need to have a pretty solid reason to keep it, to deal with the general board. I would like to keep number two, but I can be persuaded. Number three, I don't have too many feelings about. I mean, I guess two and three, I'm a little confused as why they're separate, but that's a separate question.
Angela?
Yes, thank you. On number one, I'm looking at our policy recommendation in our report, that where we recommend that the legislature explore amending the penal code to require law enforcement agencies to report the number of civilian complaints reported, disaggregated by age. So I'm not sure. I'm trying to think about the difference between number one, and I guess we're talking about the post-complaint form. Oh, okay, under SB2 versus kind of a general complaints. Okay, I see this. So on number one, my recollection was that there was a strong pushback on this one. And my suggestion on this, I think it's still really worth exploring. And I think that we may be able to be more persuasive with the entire board if we may have a session, maybe and invite some folks to talk about this, about, what are the downsides of any, and what are the challenges of any by doing this, and what are the upsides, so that the next time we come back to the full board, maybe we have a little bit more information, and then we can make sure that we also are still in agreement that this is a good thing, and maybe inviting a representative from Post or from another law enforcement agency, and maybe, somebody then does police practice research as well. With respect to the next two, I agree. I think that this one, in my view, it should be obvious that it should be a consideration. I do feel like there was maybe kind of a misunderstanding, or people were just perceiving this as we were suggesting it should be given a priority in consideration versus other things. So I feel like 2 and 3 are more about messaging, to the full board. And, maybe again, if we have someone to come to talk to us about this and about what is considered, so that, we have done some continued work on this. And so that maybe, and I assume we're so likely going to, unless we're dissuaded that this is a good idea, we will have more information to share with the board about why this is a good idea and why this does not undermine anything. If anything, we are assuming that many, robust investigations and evaluations are already doing this. We just want to make sure that all law enforcement agencies are doing this. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I guess it comes down to, maybe getting a little more information to present to the board on these issues, but I think that we should continue to pursue them.
Yeah, just very quickly, piggybacking on that, it also seems to me that the findings of our reports absolutely justify number 2 and 3. I mean, if we have these findings in the past 2 years about all of our racial disparity, really taking place with youth and young adults, then it would seem to me that numbers 2 and 3 is us being responsible and framing our recommendations based on the data that we're receiving as a board. So again, to me, I'm just going to stick with my position that 2 and 3 should be completely uncontroversial, not just on their face, but given the data that we've collected over the past couple of years. And for number 1, I'm cool with all that. It just seems to me that we have to have a reason, right? So, and let me be very specific. So what you're doing with number 1 in plain language is you're basically saying we need a new data point. What you're essentially arguing is saying minors and adults isn't enough. And we are asking for a new data point, and whether you're calling it young adults or transitional age or whatever, that's essentially what we're saying with number 1. And all I'm saying is it was evident in the full board meeting that no one had a substantive reason as to why that data point is needed. So if we're going to push that, we need a no nonsense, one sentence answer. This is why that data point is needed. If we don't have that sentence, I don't see how we can put this forward. Now, again, if we want to bring people in to make that argument, that's fine. I'm just saying, like, for us to be all crystal clear on what it is we're doing when we say this.
I got you. Anybody else have any comments on this section?
Do we have any other? Oh, I'm sorry, Sister Co-Chair, you're on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hand this period over to you. Go ahead, Sister
No,
Co-Chair.
no, go on. I'm sorry.
No, Sister, go for it, please.
My question is, since we know 1 is controversial, 2 and 3, we know we can get it through. So do we take 2 and 3 and say, yeah, let's take it to the full board for recommendations?
I'll make that motion for 2 and 3. I don't see why we wouldn't. I don't know if anyone will second, but I'll make the motion because we got to do this, y'all. We can't just talk about it. We got to make motions.
I will definitely say, since our co-chair has taken this period, Sister Co-Chair, if you don't mind, I would love to acquiesce in second.
Hey folks, this is Chauncey. I'm good with moving forward on items 2 and 3. I had to step away for a brief moment. So if I may, could someone briefly restate what the problem was with number 1?
It's not that there's a problem. It's that, again, it's evident from the prior board meeting, there's significant pushback on number 1, and us included, nobody seemed to have a reason, like clearly articulated reason, why we need that extra data point. Now, I'm not making an argument either way. I'm a sociologist. I can always find value in a new data point, right? But what I'm saying is, if we want to make that argument to the full board, there needs to be a no nonsense, like 1 sentence statement, not some like no long-winded whatever, 1 sentence. Here's why we need this data point. If we don't have that, we're just going to waste a bunch of time at the full board meeting arguing over nothing again. So I'm just saying, like, if we're going to move it forward, let's move it forward with an actual plan as to why we need it.
Okay, thanks for that, Bill. So I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So my reading of number 1, I'm interpreting as the form just allows a person to provide their age if they're a youth. Is that correct? No? What is it?
No, what number 1 is doing is essentially creating a new data. That's what I mean. So number 1 is creating a new data point. Before, all they did was say, are you a juvenile or are you an adult? Are you a youth or an adult? Under 18, over 18. What we're saying with number 1 is we're telling them on all their data collection, they have to have a new category, and we can name it whatever, young adult, transitional age, whatever, that will try and figure out who of these complainants are from the ages of 18 to 24. They didn't do that before. And so when we brought this to the full board, if you recall, They all threw a wild temper tantrum over this. It said, why are you
Got it.
making us collect new data? Why are you making us analyze new data? And frankly, nobody had an answer for them. So all I'm
Got it.
trying to say is we need to have an answer for that question if we're going to pursue this conversation again.
Got it. Thanks for that, Bill. And I apologize for being a little bit out of the loop, just trying to multitask with another meeting that's got scheduled at the same time. So I think qualitatively, there's a difference between a person that's been harmed by law enforcement that is like, I think the younger, the more potentially heinous the situation is. So trying to understand youth law enforcement interactions, that information will be helpful to know as opposed to just whether someone was an adolescent. So that would be my initial inclination thinking about this particular item. I think what will be even more helpful is, I think I offered this up during the original board meeting, is if there was a way to actually have the complainant list the actual age, as opposed to these broad categories. So for example, say that a complaint is from someone who is 20 years or 17 or 18 years old, right? All we're getting is like, this person is in this broad group. But what if the complainant was 5 and they were handcuffed and physical force was used? That sort of more detailed information could be quite helpful. So unless I'm missing something, to me, what would be more helpful is, although the categories are a good start, I wouldn't like disagree with having that, because I do think that does add value. But I think more light is shed, the more specific we can get. But I don't know how reasonable it is from a data collection standpoint. You know, it's a little bit more burden on, you know, the data scientists and things like that.
I feel like a lot of our recommendations, regardless of how much arguments we have, always gets pushed back for law enforcement and that full board. It's definitely, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if everybody at law enforcement are just pushing back on all the recommendations because they feel a certain way. But I think to move this conversation forward for the first one, I'm okay. I think the question I'm like trying to get to is like, what information do we need that helps us develop an argument to why we need it's critical for us to have the first recommendation as this subcommittee, so that we come in stronger in the full meeting to be able to push back when those arguments come at us. You're right, Bill, that in the last meeting, we didn't have as much to push back on with arguments. So what are the information we need for us to be able to move it? Because I still think it's important for us to, even as Chauncey has said, the ages is good, but I think coming in a stepping stone, like dividing that age range and then separating it from the younger folks is also critical for us to have, like building on like more data and then seeing what are some of the other options that we can continue to push in terms of like separating age or however. But I think as a task, like figuring out a task for the DOJ staff to see like what are some of the information we need to be able to develop an argument or just have a stronger push for one.
Okay, so
You see?
do we
Angela's got her
vote?
hand up. I don't know if Angela still wants to jump in. Go ahead, Angela.
I just wanted to follow up on the last comment and just note that, given Post's role with SB2 and the decertification and their experience, again, I still feel, I think it'd be important. I don't think we've really heard from them on this, and to invite them to a subcommittee meeting. They're gonna, one involves them directly, 1 and 3. And, I think it would be helpful for us to hear from them, and then we can be able to present to the board, like, to extent there are any downsides to this, we've heard them and considered them, and I just think that it would just arm us and give us more information. And then maybe, like on number 1, maybe we would even more refine it, maybe discussing, is it better to have the actual age, or, there may be some refinements we would want to make. So I think if we're going to explore number 1 with post, I would explore all of these with post. And again, given their significant role on this issue. That's kind of my general feeling on this one.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Just a couple things quickly in response, and also in response to the comments in the chat. And I actually like this idea. Like I said, I'm a sociologist, and more data is always cool for me. I think one interesting strategy, and it was mentioned in the chat, is just to change number 1 to just say, let's just get their age. Because once you get the age, like actual age, then on the back end, you can analyze that data however you want. You split up into whatever categories you want, do whatever you want to do. So, and that also probably would not give opposition a real clear angle to oppose. And it actually really links in with number 2 and 3. So I would be amenable to changing number 1 to just saying, like, hey, we just recommend that you take the age as a data point in general. Like, what's your age? And then in terms of analysis on the back end, you could do whatever you like, and we can make those decisions. But it sounds like, Angela, what you're suggesting is, before we make any decision on all 3 of these, is to invite our post representative in and talk to us about it, and then they could help us kind of make our case. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, or if there are downsides, help explain those to us so that we can consider them. And then we can evaluate it. And if we don't believe, if there are any downsides, that they, we weigh the upsides and downsides, and then I think, make a stronger case to the board, and whatever recommendation then we arrive at that point.
If you want to make a motion, I could get down with that. I don't know about the rest of the members of the committee, but I don't think that's a terrible idea.
Okay. Well, I will move that we invite post representatives to come speak to the subcommittee at a future subcommittee meeting with respect to these proposed policy recommendations 1, 2, and 3.
I'll second that.
I'll second. Gives us more chance to game this out.
Great, we can go ahead and take a roll call vote. So Member Armeling?
Aye.
Member Armeling votes aye. Member Kreiner?
Aye.
Member Kreiner votes aye. Member Guerrero? Member Guerrero? Member Hawkins?
Aye.
Member Hawkins votes aye. Member Sierra?
Aye.
Member Sierra votes aye. Member Smith?
Aye.
Member Smith votes aye. And Member Vang?
Aye.
Member Vang votes aye. The motion carries. So the motion passed to invite post to come speak to the subcommittee about recommendations 1 through 3.
So do we want to consider the next 2, the accountability 2, if we can scroll down on the doc?
Are you able to see the accountability recommendations? Great.
It seems to me, I don't have any fundamental issues with these, but it seems to me for point of argument that we would need really useful and convincing illustrations for both of these. And what I mean by that is, so for number one, for instance, what are some of these areas of egregious activities that we would believe or anyone would believe lies outside of the existing 8 or 9 categories? So I think if we wanted to go forward with one and maybe even two in a kind of a similar way, we would really need to be armed with, well, these are the kinds of things that we believe might be falling outside of those categories. These are the kinds of things that we're kind of worried about. Otherwise, I'm not sure how we move forward making the arguments, but that's just my initial kind of thoughts on it.
Angela?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the thinking of the majority of the board members on this was like, let's continue to, we're just starting to get in SB2 data. And I think that this subcommittee, it'd be important for us to now review, the next wave of information, and then we'll be in a better position to see, do there seem to be gaps that are related to, our racial profiling, mission. So to me, these are areas of just further work by our subcommittee versus, bringing it up to the board at the next board meeting.
Any other comments? So the motion is Angela.
I don't know if we necessarily need a motion. I mean, I guess I suppose I removed that this subcommittee continue to consider the issues, and explore the issues set forth in these prior recommendations 1 and 2 under accountability.
Is everyone in agreement with that? Jasmine, how do we handle it?
Well, it needs a second. So I'll second.
Great. So we can go ahead and take a roll call vote. The motion is to consider these areas in the recommendations 1 and 2 further in this upcoming year's report and in the accountability subcommittee. Member Armley?
Aye.
Member Armley votes aye. Member Kreiner?
Aye.
Member Kreiner votes aye. Member Guerrero? I believe Member Guerrero has left the meeting. Member Hawkins?
Aye.
Member Hawkins votes aye. Member Sierra?
Aye.
Member Sierra votes aye. Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Smith votes aye. Member Vang?
Aye.
Great. Member Vang votes aye. The motion carries unanimously.
Cool. Chairs, do we want to move to the new issues?
Yes, please.
All right, I'm happy to get us started. I had some notes here from the presentation from I believe Rebecca earlier, and thank you again for that. So I think I'm definitely all for continuing to collect and analyze the SB2 and DCERT data because it's just so new. And I also would like to propose, and I'm happy to make this as a motion, that one of the things we look at this year is that discrepancy that we recognized with the initial data between Southern California and Northern California. So, and I remember having this conversation offline with some of the folks at DOJ, because they just called me up to just ask on background kind of how I might, as a researcher, think about these questions data-wise. And we had a really good conversation. And it seems to me that there's a great deal to be learned about why we had so many successful complaints making it all the way through to decertification in Southern California, and desperately low in comparison in Northern California, and to try and figure out what's going on there. And there's a million reasons why that could be the case, but that's precisely why we need to ask the question. So I'm just going to say, like, given the newness, if you will, of SB2, of decertification, and of the data itself, I really think we need to keep a pretty tight, we need to keep that tightly in our scope, right? That needs to be under the microscope, I think, for a little while, until we can make sense of that data and why it's looking the way that it does. So I guess to frame it as a motion, I would move that we as a committee for this year's report continue to collect and analyze that SB2 complaint and decertification data with a specific sort of concentration on sort of looking at some of the data questions we had on the prior report, e.g., why are we seeing these discrepancies, for example, between Southern California and Northern California, and these sorts of things. I don't know. That's not, might not be tight enough for a motion, Yasmin. I apologize, but I did my best there.
Not a problem. We appreciate that, Dr. Armelin. Just jumping in to let you know, you don't actually need to make a motion at this point. So what we're looking for at this point is any just general consensus among the subcommittee members about areas that you would like to explore. And then the next step would be for the subcommittee representatives to report that out at the full board meeting, but we don't actually need a motion at this point.
Beautiful. Then I can shut my mouth. Thank you, fam.
And I would like to see the differences, disparity too, especially when I know SB2 came from up north. The people who, yeah. And I would like to see if there's a big, if you don't have, if there's this big disparity in the amount of complaints, compared to the number of people in those areas. Any other new items? Oh, Angela has her hand raised.
Just on the last item, that also it makes a lot of sense to me as well, to further continuing to explore that and look at those disparities. I like that idea.
While others are giving this thought, could I ask a quick point of information question to our DOJ folks quickly? So a bunch of us caught recently that there was it seemed like almost like an informational session the DOJ offered on the CLEAR Act on AB 655. I wrote that bill and I didn't find out about that till like way late. I just got these emails from people like, hey, DOJ is doing a thing on your bill. And so I'm just like generally curious from our DOJ reps, like what's going on with that? Where is sort of what's happening in terms of 655 or CLEAR Act implementation? And for other board members that don't know why I'm asking the question, so the CLEAR Act, one of the things the CLEAR Act did was essentially open up a door for decertification for police officers who may or may not be members of hate groups, right? Klan members, neo-Nazis, this kind of stuff. That's what the CLEAR Act is for. But it was a real slow roll, as many things are in our state, to get the bill out to where it's actually being used. And so 655 is obviously connected to SB2 because it's one of the ways that a police officer can be put up for decertification. So I just haven't heard anything about it. And the session that DOJ held was actually during my class. So I was teaching, I couldn't go. So I'm just asking on behalf of a bunch of people in my world, what's going on with that? What's the plans there? Can that become part of our conversation since we're dealing with SB2 stuff? And it strikes me that board members should be aware of the Clear Act and 655 and all that. So just a general question for our DOJ folks.
Hi, everyone. This is Christine Chuang from the DOJ, and I can answer those questions. And so as background, the DOJ has published a notice of proposed rulemaking relating to AB 655. So right now, our office is accepting comments from the public, and we encourage all members of the public, including members of this RIPA board, to participate in that comment process. I can circulate or members of our team can circulate sort of the notice of proposed rulemaking with information on how to submit comments. Perfect. I also wanted to note that our office will be holding 2 public hearings in person in March. And so with the circulation of the proposed rulemaking, we'll circulate those dates and times. One is scheduled for March 12th in the afternoon from 3 to 5 in Los Angeles. And then the second session will be held in Oakland on March 14th from 3 to 5. And so we really do encourage folks, either, via email or in person to submit a comment. And, we agree, some of these issues RIPA members will likely be very interested in commenting on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. My apologies to everyone else. I didn't mean to distract us.
No, thanks for sharing. Anyone else have any comments? Co-chair, where we at?
Next, if there's no other further comments, then we'll go out to our public for their comments. Before we go out there, does our board have any other discussion regarding the report? Going once? Oh, I do see a hand raised by Ms. Angela.
Yes, thank you. I would also suggest with respect to the deterrent language that, our subcommittee at a minimum continue to monitor the case before the California Supreme Court on the penal code provision with respect to the deterrent language. So that I think that is important issue. And depending on the outcome of that case, then we can further discuss if we want to explore recommendations with respect to deterrent language on complaint forms.
Board members, if I can just jump in on behalf of DOJ, we wanted to also remind the subcommittee members with respect to POST. There is a workshop coming up that POST has invited board members to. A general invitation went out. And so this would be discussing SB2. So in terms of gathering additional information, an invitation has gone out to board members to attend this AB 443 workshop in order to gain additional information about the decertification process.
Okay, where we at, co-chair?
We're still making sure that none of our board members have any other comments or any other suggestions to give based on the report. Anyone else?
Hey folks, this is Chauncey.
Okay.
I have a few recommendations for ideas for the 2026 report.
Okay.
Okay, can you just give me 1 second? Okay, all right. Sorry about that. So one recommendation concerned looking at some of the consequences of pretextual stops.
Mhm.
It would, I work in this field and speaking to various stakeholders, a significant problem was brought to my attention that I think rises to the level of significancy that something should be done about it. So that's why this has context for this particular suggestion. And it specifically is about people that end up being killed as a result of racial profiling and pretextual stops. And I'm not talking about this typical scenario that folks might be thinking about. I think we've heard and seen many instances in which an officer pulls a person over for a relatively minor traffic violation. The situation goes astray and use of force occurs and someone can. But more broadly than that, there's also many, many people being killed annually as a result of vehicle collisions that arise from stops that are relatively minor at the outset in terms of the reason the officer is trying to pull a person over. So I'll get more straight to the point. Every year, there's fatal car crashes that occur. And there's news reports which show that when it comes to fatal car crashes, Black people are 4 times more likely to be killed than white people. And that these fatal car crashes disproportionately occur in neighborhoods with higher concentrations of Black folks or other folks of color. And in addition, there's also some national research that shows that a significant amount of these fatal car crashes arise from traffic stops that officers are attempting to make for relatively minor traffic violations. And the driver, for whatever reason, ends up not stopping. Now, as a person of color, I think there are a whole host of reasons why someone may be afraid to stop when law enforcement tries to stop them. I think given their long history of racial profiling, aggressiveness of law enforcement towards Black men specifically, they may just be in fear for their lives when it comes to those sorts of interactions. And in addition to that, I mean, there could be a whole host of other reasons someone fails to stop, maybe probation or parole, maybe they have a suspended license, maybe they just don't have the financial means to afford a ticket, right? There's a variety of things that could be going through a person's head for why they decided not to comply. But the problem here is, right, there's a bunch of these attempted stops occurring, people drive off, and what happens is the situation escalates far beyond expected because the officers end up chasing them. And in the state of Washington and some other jurisdictions around the country, they have been exploring and passing laws which essentially tell law enforcement that if a person does not stop for something that does not create an imminent risk of safety, and you can apprehend the person later. For example, if you can get their license plate, you can always, not always, but it's not unlikely for someone to be able to be found later, especially if it's like a vehicle equipment or administrative issue that's the basis of the traffic stop. If they can satisfy those two predicates, right, relatively minor issue, not imminent threat to safety, you can probably get a hold of the person later, then they have a policy in place which says that officers shouldn't be stopping people for those things. And then, what's even more appalling when I looked into this issue is that 36% of the deaths that occur in fatal car crash, fatal police chases are bystanders, right? So people not even involved. So it could be the officer that died, it could be the driver, the person trying to stop. And a third of the time it's bystanders. And then you overlap that with the fact that the concentrations tend to occur in areas where there's higher populations of people of color. To me, it's extremely troubling. So the Federal Department of Justice in 2023 and the Peace Officer Executive Research Forum, or the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, they issued recommendations in alignment with what I just offered us, that these sorts of stops shouldn't be occurring, and that states and localities should be adopting policies that help address this significant concern. And again, Washington passed a law on this issue not too long ago. So, you know, looking at the moving pieces and thinking about things that the board consider for the future, this is one thing I want to offer up for consideration. I have 3 more, but I'd like to pause before overwhelming you with different ideas. But yes, I'll pause there and see if there's any.
No, you don't have to pause. No, you don't have to pause. But I just want to ask you, we're hearing the background noise. Is anybody hearing that background noise? Is there any way, because I'm hearing background
Okay, yeah,
noise.
I'll take a walk. I'll try to walk to a quieter location. But yes, so any reactions? If not, I'll proceed to the other suggested topics for the subcommittee to consider. Okay, I'll take that as folks are just know. Go ahead.
This is Angela. The one, and I wasn't able to hear that well because of the background noise, so I apologize. But what I'm thinking about, maybe others and you all can jump in, is to the extent that this is connected, you know, I think it's a really interesting issue. I wonder, is it better housed in our policy subcommittee versus what ours is accountability and complaint? But you know, maybe we could talk about the connection for our particular subcommittee. And again, I wasn't able to hear, I think I may have missed some of the discussion because of some interference we were hearing.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. If you want me to like synthesize it really quickly, I can restate things. Would that be helpful for you?
Yeah, or if others or if you have like that more, I think my just general question is, does this fit within our committee, or would it be better considered in our policy subcommittee?
I was sorry to see. I was also wondering if the I was just wondering, or is it also something that sub data subcommittee is that some like an aspect of the subcommittee? Sub data subcommittee can also be a part of that conversation, because I actually really think the topic on hand is like a really good for us to kind of engage in. Maybe the subcommittee, maybe policy, or the sub data. And love to hear, as Angela said, how the complaints subcommittee can also be a part of that conversation.
Thanks, Shaw. Yeah, I was thinking about that before today's conversation. So I was appointed like mid last year, June. So the topics are already determined. So I wasn't, and coming into this conversation today, I wasn't 100% sure on process. So I don't know if it's well established that subcommittee ideas have to pertain. Subcommittee ideas for the full board report have to be restricted to the focal point issue for that committee, because it's going to the full board. So if I'm not in another subcommittee, what's the process for offering up ideas that may be pertinent to the board generally, but I'm just not in that sub? So that's the reason I'm just going to share what I have today. And then in terms of process, I'm open to, you know, whatever folks think is most reasonable. But I think in terms of if we want to get good ideas forward, we should try to make it, as efficient as possible, but also recognize that there are obviously areas of specialty that folks may be more inclined to deal with. Okay, so if there's nothing else, what I'll do is walk through the others that I'd like to share, and then I think these should be a little bit more to the point. And this one, I'll go on to one that's more specifically tied to accountability and compliance, at least like the nature of this. So one idea that I think everyone here is familiar with the existence of local civilian oversight bodies, various accountability institutions at the local level that members of the public can be a part of, that are established as an entity to oversee the local police department, sheriff's department, whatever type of law enforcement agency it is. Right, so imagine post, but local, comprised of community members and other folks. My understanding from experience in the field is that what occurs in civilian oversight at the local level varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and the powers of local oversight entities is disparate. It's not apples to apples. Sometimes one jurisdiction may be one thing, another may be another. And thinking about accountability and that general aim, I think what I'm hearing from folks in the field is that some local oversight entities are better than others. And I think what would be helpful for the board to consider is some form of a landscape analysis of this particular function, so that we can get a better understanding of what's going on when it comes to these local entities, particularly when it speaks to the issue of traffic stops, potential profiling, to develop a better understanding and then potentially develop recommendations on best practices on how these entities should function with and tailor that with some nexus to racial and identity profiling. So that's another idea that I think could be helpful to consider. And then third is, I think when it comes to the issue of racial profiling, there is a standard scenario that many folks may have in mind, right? An officer sees someone, Black, Latinx, or another person of color. They want to stop them because of the way they look. They identify some form of a minor problem, and then things go on from there. They're very harmful, detrimental. Everyone knows the reasons why we're here to address that issue. But another thing that is occurring is some form of evolution in how profiling occurs, right? There's this standard, which is still very, very problematic. But from what I'm hearing, following this issue, the ways in which officers may profile people is much more complex than the typical interpersonal stop. And what a lot of law enforcement agencies today are using are various forms of surveillance technologies to profile individual people and communities of color. So think of it as high-tech racial profile, right? And it's becoming much more sophisticated and formed, so that on its face, it may come across as relatively innocuous and harmful. right? So, hey, you don't want as many officers stopping people. What we'll do is we'll place all of these cameras around, and then you know, presumably that's less harmful. But what I'm hearing from folks in the field is that in practice, the same or similar detrimental harms can be inflicted, especially when you think about the use of these surveillance technologies upon a community in aggregate. There's just a lot of potential challenges there. So that's the essence of it. And what I'm thinking of it is just, you know, maybe there's a way for the board to explore the evolution of racial profiling in ways in which it may manifest in modern day society based on how things have evolved over time. And maybe we could juxtapose that with the historical or traditional notions of profiling. And I think that could help shed light on this particular topic and help set a foundation for potentially some innovative reforms for the board to consider that could also be in turn considered by the legislature. So I'll pause there to catch my breath. Talking about a bit of one.
Thank you, Board Member Smith. Is there any rebuttal, or does anyone have any comments based on what our board member has made suggestions regarding, or does our DOJ have a response?
This is Angela. With respect to the idea about looking at the civilian oversight bodies and doing a landscape and review, I think that would be, and tethered to with respect to racial profiling investigations. I think that could be very interesting. I don't think we've done that before, and I know just in general there is, as was noted, just a great variety of types of oversight agencies and their workings and the amount of authority they have and who it includes and all that. So I think that could be a very interesting area for us to look into. And with respect to the first idea about how these ideas that maybe don't fit as neatly into our subcommittee, I think they're still very important to bring up, and I think definitely to be brought up at the full board meeting. Because then that could be something that the whole board could consider, or that subcommittee could consider, and as Chaveng noted, it may be several of our subcommittees that may be involved in that issue. So I think the first one, I would suggest something very important to bring up at the full board meeting. So those are some of the comments I have on that. And DOJ may be able to remind us to think about. I don't think we have done a landscape of civilian oversight bodies in the past.
Just to jump in and provide some context on prior reports, that's correct. So there hasn't been a landscape of existing civilian oversight committee procedures and what those look like currently. There has been discussion in the past of best practices for civilian oversight committees, as well as general discussions of the broad categories or the broad buckets for each type of procedure, but we haven't done a landscape of that.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we can also take a look at what we've done in the past, and maybe we can build on that.
Thank you, board member. So are there any other comments? Are there any comments from our board? Any comments from DOJ? Right before we get ready to close out our board discussion period, are there any other comments from our board?
Apologies, board members. I just wanted to jump in really quickly too on behalf of DOJ. We really appreciate today's discussion. It's been incredibly thorough, and we appreciate everyone's ideas. I did just want to raise too, one question from DOJ at the end of today's meeting will be what your priorities are in terms of areas of focus for this year's report. We do have somewhat limited resources, so it would be helpful to have maybe an understanding of your preferences in terms of which items you would like to address most fully in the upcoming report. And as opposed to items that we can keep an eye on and monitor, but may not be as fulsomely discussed in the report.
I have a question on process.
Sure.
If someone could just unpack the process for me, how do we go from ideation to, what does this look like? Ideation to board approval. Because I joined the board in June, so the themes and the contents of the report have already been determined.
Sure, so I could go ahead and answer that. The way that our procedure works is during these subcommittee meetings, this initial round of subcommittee meetings, this is where DOJ is able to get some clarity from you as members of the board about where we can begin our research. The next step from here is for you all to discuss at the full board meeting. So that would include a report out from the co-chairs in this subcommittee about what was discussed today, to raise those topics with the full board and then have a discussion among all of the board members to hopefully reach a consensus about what areas this subcommittee would cover in the 2026 report. From there, DOJ will continue researching the topics that have been raised today and will present a draft to you for the second round of subcommittee meetings, which will likely be in May or June. Does that answer your question, Member Smith?
Yes. So it sounds like, we talk about it today. Like I said, we'll have the conversation, talk about the full board, and then DOJ takes that and runs with it, and then the process kind of evolves from there. Is that right?
Right. So we'll be presenting the research that we've obtained based on today's discussion to you at the next round of subcommittee meetings, along with an initial draft. And then in that second round of subcommittee meetings is an opportunity for you all to discuss what you think of the initial research that we've conducted, if there are additional areas that you would like to look at, or if there's anything that changes between now and then in terms of what you'd like included in the 2026 report.
Okay. Thank you for that, guys. I greatly appreciate the support of DOJ on some of these very important issues.
Just a quick follow-up question on the process. The topics Chauncey brought up in this subcommittee, and that we are also trying to figure out what committee it fits in, or how many of the committees should be in this conversation. That could be brought up in the full board meeting, and we have we have a full board conversation about it to see if it's a path that we want to kind of go as a full board. Is that correct?
That is correct. And also just to highlight, you do have the opportunity as board members. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some feedback.
Would you mind muting your, thank you.
Thank you. So you do have the opportunity as board members not only to participate in the subcommittees that you're assigned to, but you're welcome to attend any of the other subcommittee meetings for this board. However, that is with the caveat that you would be attending as a member of the public. So any comments that you would have would come up during the public comment section. But you are able to raise any ideas that you may have through public comment with the other subcommittees prior to discussion at the full board meeting. And just to reiterate again, if you aren't able to attend those other subcommittee meetings and participate in public comment, you can then raise the ideas and discussion during the full board meeting as members of the board.
Board Member Angela, do you have a?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, please.
So in terms of potential priorities, it sounds like from this discussion, you know, we talked about trying to continue to examine SP2 data, right? And including the discrepancies that we're seeing between different regions. So it sounds like we may have a consensus that that's a priority. We also talked about the prior recommendations and, you know, doing further work on those. You know, some involve SB2. So it seems like that's another priority. And then with the civilian oversight body work, you know, that potentially could be a priority. And I guess we need to hear from DOJ staff, like, does that seem like a doable amount of priorities? The one we didn't talk about that they had, DOJ had also suggested was looking at best practices for investigations of a good complaint process, or best practices for a good complaint process. We haven't talked about that, but you know, that, I don't know, it may be one or the other. Maybe we table that in light of the work that maybe we want to do on civilian oversight bodies. But it's I think that kind of covers the areas at least we've talked about so far, but to be able to provide our DOJ staff some general direction and then hear from them if that seems like a doable amount of topics. I don't know if others, if I'm missing anything.
Yeah, I would like to also see if they can look into the other C items.
I'm sorry, what was that? I
Research.
couldn't hear that one.
I would also like to see if the DOJ staff can look into the other two topics that I shared for purposes of developing preliminary research.
Okay. So maybe in light of that, do we not necessarily this year start looking into best practices for a good complaint process? Because again, you know, I think you know, as a priority is maybe that one is a lower priority for next year. I think there's only so much that probably the staff can, you know, handle for, you know, each subcommittee.
I'd like to get some more clarity on how we're determining priorities and how many, what's the bandwidth, what's the reasonable number for DOJ staff? Because I'm not, doesn't seem like I'm completely understanding. So.
Yeah, no, that's.
I can jump in and provide some clarity. I think ideally for the civilian complaints section and for accountability, it would be ideal to have maybe one priority topic for each of those sections, if those topics are more thorough. So for example, completing a landscape analysis of civilian oversight committee procedures would be a pretty heavy lift. And so there may be some ways that we could narrow that task if we were looking, for example, at law enforcement agencies of a certain size. That may reduce the scope of that work. However, if we were to look at all law enforcement agencies in California, there are approximately 500, and that would be a very heavy task for to get done this year, in addition to looking at SB2. So the short answer is, unfortunately, that it depends. But I think it really depends on the breadth of the tasks that are being looked at. So if it's something that is more detailed or granular, like looking at a landscape analysis, that is a heavier lift and we would need fewer priorities.
Okay, that's helpful. So what I'm thinking is some of them are more detailed and are heavier lift. The ones that don't require like a jurisdiction by jurisdiction evaluation, right? But could be more like high level research. on a particular problem. Is there capacity for those to be considered too? Yeah.
Yeah, if we're looking at a couple of topics as more of like a literature review on a couple of topics, we are
Yeah,
able
that's
to
what-
provide. I'm sorry?
Yes, I was just acknowledging that I was listening to what you were saying. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, not a problem. Okay, great. Yeah. So, I mean, if it's a more high level overview, it may be feasible to look at maybe 2 topics per section. So, looking at complaints, we could maybe do 2 high level overviews there and maybe 2 in accountability. But it would still be helpful to know among those 2 if the board has any preference to which takes primary priority. But we can also conduct initial research at this point and present that to you in the second subcommittee meeting to also help give you more clarity on the available research for each of the topics.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm thinking is, yeah, it would be great if we could, if possible, get at least 2 to move forward with preliminary. And I cannot commit to these, but in the instance that there's a topic that I think would be helpful for the board to consider that may be beyond your capacity or some of your colleagues, I have to look on my end to see how much capacity I have, but I would offer up that one thing that I may be able to do is some preliminary research on my own to share with subcommittee members and board members, so that we can all get a better understanding of these problems, just to supplement some of the bandwidth realities that we all have to deal with. So I may offer something up like that up. I may offer that up, but I just have to see what's all on my plate. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Member Smith. And that would be wonderful if you are able to share any of that with us. For yourself and for also the other board members, feel free to submit any research or ideas that you may have to us through the AB 953 email, and we can pass that along to the staff that are working on each of the sections.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
One other suggestion may be also if staff could send us a link or remind us what we've already done in terms of like the best practices for the oversight agencies. And we can also take a look at that so we have some more context as we may want to drill down on how to narrow any review that we're going to do.
Absolutely. We can get that out to you.
Yeah. Okay. So in the meantime, then it seems like on this topic of accountability, I don't know if the subcommittee is in agreement, is SB2, the further work on SB2, the priority that we would like DOJ staff to work on? And that would be, further review of the data, further digging into especially the data with racial profiling complaints and disparities. Given that we also wanted to relook at the recommendation about are there areas of serious misconduct that we think are not covered. So I think to do that, we do need kind of a deep dive into the data. So my suggestion would be like for accountability, that would be the top priority thus far.
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, board member. Is there a response?
I agree with Angela.
Thank you, Sister
Do we need to
Wilson.
vote or do we need to vote?
Board Member Smith, having a little trouble hearing your audio.
Do we need to vote?
No, I don't think this is a voting matter. I think we're just looking for, and thank you, Board Member Smith, for that clarification. But no, I don't believe so. I believe what Board Member Sierra just lifted, as long as our DOJ department or our staff has given us the go ahead that they will suffice, which I think Sister Gaz has already done. I think we're okay. I'm just leaning to know, is there any other response from our staff?
None from us at this point. We appreciate this, and this has been very helpful. It's also something we can firm up a little bit more in the discussion of next steps portion of the agenda, which takes place
Right.
after public comment too.
Correct. Thank you, Ms. Jess. Any of board members have any other comments regarding the 2026 report?
The only other thing, this is Angela, I was going to bring up, accountability is in complaints are, there's a lot of overlap, but it sounds like we can also, there may be room to have a priority in with respect to the complaint process. And I think we had talked about already about further monitoring the litigation around the deterrent language, and perhaps there was a suggestion looking at LEAs that have already taken the deterrent language out, and if their complaint numbers, there's any correlation with the complaint numbers they're seeing versus those that include it, or possibly looking at best practices for a good complaint process. So maybe one of those issues the committee could select for a priority as well. And I guess my 2 cents on this would be, since we may be pretty heavy on the work that we're doing with accountability, maybe with respect to complaints, rather than do a whole nother large topic about best practices, maybe we do the continuation of monitoring the penal code litigation over the language that's in the complaint process, and to the extent that there is time and resources to see if there can be an evaluation of the differences in complaint numbers between those LEAs that do include it and those that don't. But that is maybe not as high of a priority. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Sister Board Member. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate your suggestions as well. One more time, based on a suggestion that was just given by our board member, Yaz or staff, is there any rebuttal or any response? Or is it duly noted?
Duly noted at this point. No response from us yet. We look forward to discussing this a little bit further in the next steps section. But I think we do that. To respond to Board Member Sierra, I think that would be helpful too, if there is some consideration among the subcommittee about how to maybe balance the work. So if there is more desire to focus on accountability this year, to reduce some of the research tasks for complaints.
Thank you so much, Yaz. One more time out to our board. Are there any other items for discussion? If not, I will close our board discussion period down and move on to in our agenda. One more time, is there any other items for discussion? If not, I want to thank each and every one of you board members for the responses you've given, but also for the suggestions and comments that have been given directed to our staff based on our 2026 report. We are now going to go to our public comment period. I know that there were a few individuals that had their hands raised. We're going to ask if you wouldn't mind if you would kindly unmute yourselves, and we'll try to do it as orderly as possible because I'm not able to see all whose hands are raised. But if you would just unmute yourself, if you would please do us a favor, identify yourself, identify the county that you are calling in, and if you would give a brief comment or period on what you are wanting to discuss. We appreciate it. I believe Michelle, I believe you're unmuted. Okay, ma'am, we're having a hard time hearing you, ma'am. Still not able to hear you, ma'am. No, ma'am, we are still not able to hear you yet. I tell you what, can we do this? Can we move to our next person? We'll come right back to Miss Michelle, and we'll come back to you, dear heart, once you see if we can get your audio. Just try to maybe check your settings and see if we can do it that way. Okay. All right. I believe we have one other individual that's on. I believe on your screen the title is The Jamaican. If you could just give us your name, if you would, to identify yourself. If not, it's fine as well. And we'll entertain your comment.
I'm Richard Hilton, and I would like to think that I'm dealing with serious people, but somehow I get the impression that I'm not. And I begin not to insult anyone, but simply to observe that if these board members know that the data that you are using is unreliable, why do you consistently and constantly refer to taking a deep dive into the data? You're diving deeply into data that you know is unreliable because you have not verified it. First step, verify the data and then dive. With respect to complaints, what I do is complain. That is my occupation. I have complained to the CADOJ, Post, and when I try to get information on the complaints, one of the things I hear, these are the ones that are most important to me, is that the matters are subject to investigations and therefore they may not be disclosed. Are you serious? You obviously are not. With respect to San Francisco, they have a variation on that. What they claim is that I have withdrawn my complaint. Do you get the impression that I am somebody who would withdraw a complaint? I don't believe so. You need to be serious, and I don't think you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we go back up to Michelle? Let's see if we can hear Miss Michelle. Miss Michelle, you are free to give your comment, ma'am. And Miss Michelle, we're still having trouble hearing your audio. I'm so sorry, dear. Can you try one more time, ma'am? Yeah, we're still having trouble. If you're on a laptop, ma'am, let's try to maybe see if you can take unplug the headphones, and maybe that'll work. Let's try that one more time. Let's see if we can do that. No, ma'am, still. We'll go to someone else. We'll come right back to you again, okay? Don't worry about it. We're gonna get you, okay? We'll get you. Do we have anyone else from our community? Anyone else for public comment? Again, is there anyone else for public comment? One more time, anyone else for public comment? If not, we'll try one more time with Miss Michelle before we close our public comment period down. Miss Michelle, would you like to try one more time?
Just to chime in really quick, Pastor Kreiner, it looks like Michelle
Yes.
is maybe trying to log in again.
Okay.
But if we see her pop in, we can also, she's also able to put her comment in the chat, so we can remind her of that when she rejoins as
Oh,
well.
good point. Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
great, and if anyone else, any other members of the community have a public comment that they would like to leave, feel free to do so in the chat as well.
Is there anyone else from our community? Anyone else for public comment? All right. If not, what we'll do is it okay, yes, to back out of the public comment to go to our discussion? And if Michelle comes back in, open that back up, or once we close public comment, is that closed for the agenda?
I believe the board can come back to that.
Okay. Okay, so let's move to our discussion of next steps. 1 second, please. Move to our discussion of next steps. And I'll move into that area now. And in this particular area, I'll turn it over to Yas.
Board Member Kreiner, I see we actually do have Michelle Wittig back. We'd like to return to public comment.
Okay, yeah, let's do so. Thank you, Yas. Michelle, can we hear you now? Okay, Michelle, we're still having trouble hearing you. If you can, you are more than welcome to enter our comments, our chat box. Place it in the chat box. I'll read it out loud when you're ready, okay? And then we'll do our best to answer or respond to your comment. Is that okay, Ms. Michelle? Okay, if we could just give a brief moment so she can place that in the chat box. Yes, I'm not able to see it on my end, but if you can let me know when that's in there, and I'll try to find a way to read it out loud, or maybe ask one of our board members to read it.
Absolutely, I'll let you know, Pastor Kreiner. Okay, looks like we do have Michelle Wittig's comment in the chat. Co-Chair Kreiner, would you like me to read that?
Yes, ma'am. And Ms. Yas, I will state to our board that I have a hard stop at 12. And if we are still on, which I think we probably still will be on, I will turn it over to our co-chair, Ms. LaWanda, to chair the remainder of the meeting if I do need to hop off.
Thank you for letting us know, Co-Chair Kreiner. And just to let you know, also, we are at 4 members of the board, it looks like right now. So we would not have quorum if you do need to log off at 12. But the next item on the agenda is just next steps, so we can hopefully get this wrapped up before.
Okay, sounds great.
Great. And the comment from Michelle Wittig says that there are 2 partial indicators of racial profiling, complaints and stops. Each have been criticized, and she will send written comment detailing the issues and possible solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, so much. Yeah, we give them right back to you, dear, applauding you. Is that something that we can address? Michelle, thank you for your dedication and consistency for staying on to make sure that we hear you. We want to make sure that you're always heard. All right. Do we have any other comments? Going once, Are there any other comments? Going twice. Ms. Yaz, is there anything else in our chat box?
Just the next steps. So if the board members can let us
No, I'm sorry.
know.
I sincerely apologize, Ms. Yaz. I'm not able to see the comments. What I was asking was, are there any other comments from our public?
Oh, I apologize. No, there are no more comments in the chat.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Yaz. All right, well, with that, we'll close down our public comment period. To all those that have given comments, we thank you so much. And to all of our public that is on, we honor you as well. We'll move to our next steps and voting on any subcommittee actions. Yes, is this something I'm turning over to you, dear?
This is for your discussion as the subcommittee members, but I can just provide a quick overview. So what would be helpful from our perspective as DOJ is essentially marching orders on where we should begin our research. So that would mean what topics you would like to have initial research on for the accountability section and also for the complaints section. The other thing to keep in mind is this is likely what you and Co-Chair Hawkins would be reporting out at the full board meeting in terms of what the subcommittee would like to discuss in the 2026 report. So for our board, are there any next steps? And is there anything that we need to move forward with when it comes to voting on?
This is Angela. I'll just jump in. Just kind of summarizing, at least from my notes, I think some of our next steps is for our DOJ staff, if they could explore as we voted with Post to see if we could have some input from Post at the next subcommittee meeting about the recommendations, the prior recommendations we discussed. And another priority area, it seems like based on all our discussion, is the further research with respect to SB2 data and the issues that were discussed. And then to the extent, and also that to the extent there's priorities, it seems like our accountability priorities would be the higher priority at this point. And to the extent there is some resources and time to look at some of the complaint issues, it would be the monitoring and any additional work with respect to the penal code provision litigation that deals with the deterrence language in the complaint form. And then to maybe some research on how to further refine, if there is additional time, to look at some of the oversight body that topic, if there's a way to further refine that would make it realistic for us to pursue.
Okay.
Based on my notes, that's, what I have in terms of at least priorities. But I don't know, others may have, a different view on that, or kind of see the priorities a little bit differently.
Well, Angela, that was incredible. Thank you.
Yeah.
You take way better notes than me. I'll tell you that much, sister. Board members, do we have any other items to review? Any next steps? Anything for consideration that needs to be voted on by our board? As I hear none, I will close down our discussion period for our next steps. If there is nothing else, I will now move to asking each board member if they have any final comment to make before we close out our meeting today. As I hear none from our board, I will ask our co-chair. Mr. Co-chair, do you have any other items that you would like to discuss or any comments you would like to make before we close out our meeting today?
No, none at all. It was a really good meeting. Very, very good.
Thanks, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you for your leadership, for your wisdom. We appreciate you. And now to our staff, to our DOJ, are there any other final comments or any comments you would like to make before we close out?
I just wanted to reaffirm, so what I have down in our notes, we have priorities to explore getting a representative from Post to attend the next subcommittee meeting and discuss those prior recommendations that were tabled last year. We also have, in order to look at further research on the SB2 data, monitoring deterrent language and complaint forms based on the outcome of the case that's currently before the California Supreme Court, and also looking back at what the board has previously done with respect to civilian oversight committees, and coming with proposals for how to further explore the efficacy of those entities. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
No, ma'am, on mine, I believe everything that you covered is exactly what was stated. We appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank
To
you
our
all.
board, does Ms. Yass have everything that was needed? Wonderful. If there is nothing else from our staff and nothing from our board, we would like to thank each of you for agreeing to hop on and to be with us today for our Critical Race and Identity Profiling Advisory Board. We honor you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your wisdom. We appreciate your comments. And we appreciate all the efforts that you are doing to make this place a better place for all of us to live in. Again, we thank you, and our meeting will adjourn at 11:58 a.m. Thank you so much.